Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting. And with that, we'll get underway because we have a couple conditional use permits this evening. The first item on our agenda is approval of the December 13th minutes, which were actually just a short meeting to approve meetings. CUP information.
Yeah, the reason.
Move to approve.
I second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Roll call. Let's start at this end. Steve.
Aye.
Joe. Aye.
Aye.
Marshall.
Tim, aye.
Jerry, aye.
And that is unanimous. First order of business is done and approved. The second order of business is just general public comment. If anybody has something they would like to bring to the board that isn't on our agenda, i.e. the other two COPs that we're doing tonight. Seeing none, we are now done with item number 2. Item number 3, I would actually like to defer to the end of the meeting like I tend to do in past meetings. We can deal with our Board of Elections. You don't have to sit through that if you don't want to. So that said, Amy, will you give us information on the first COP?
Good evening, board members. I believe the first public hearing proposal for tonight is for 2518 Atani. So the conditional use permit tonight, as I stated, is for 2518 Atani Drive. The applicant is requesting a CUP for a bed and breakfast within the moderate density single-family residential zoning district. According to Moscow City Zoning Code, a bed and breakfast inn is establishment primarily engaging in providing short-term lodging, durations of less than 21 consecutive days per guest, for compensation in private homes or accessory buildings where the owner resides upon the property and where breakfast may or may not be provided. This applicant is proposing a short-term rental of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom within an existing single-family home. Will be accessed via the main entrance of the primary home. And there will be a maximum of 4 guests with parking space for at least 2 cars on site. This is the subject property here, just north of Atani, a little west of Ryan Lane, if you're familiar with that subdivision. This is a closer aerial image of the subject property. Characteristics are very similar of a single-family home. This is the front of the subject property. As you can see, there's a 2-car garage along with 2-car parking in the driveway. So this is the floor plan of the subject property. As I stated, parking pad in front for 2 cars, 2-car garage here, owner's bedroom and bathroom here, private kitchen, living room. The short-term rentals would access through the front entrance here, just as you would the main home. The 2 bedrooms for short-term rental are here in the front, along with the additional bathroom. Zoning for that property, as I stated, is R2. Everything surrounding is also R2. It's the moderate density single-family residential zoning district. Bed and breakfast inn are considered a conditionally permitted use within the R2 zoning district. The subject property is approximately 10,963 square feet. Like I said, west of Ryan Lane. It has 72 feet of frontage along Atani Drive. The surrounding properties to the east and south and west all consist of single-family residence, and the property to the north is vacant land. Vehicles access via Atani Drive, which is a 24-foot wide or 28-foot wide street with tree lawn and sidewalk on both the north and the south sides of the street, and it's designated as a neighborhood street. So recommendation for tonight, based on the fact that it meets all the zoning criteria for a bed and breakfast, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit. for 2518 Batani Drive with no conditions. And I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Amy. Anybody have questions for staff?
Right now.
We do not.
All right,
Thank you.
easy enough.
With that introduction of the project, I will open up the hearing for public testimony. Would the applicant care to come forward and state your name and address at the podium for the record and tell us about your CUP?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm John Wright and my wife Candace with me from 2518 Itani Drive. Everything that Amy just told you is excellently stated, and I don't have anything to edit, modify, or correct. That sounded perfect. Any
Okay.
questions that you might have?
Any questions for the applicant?
Do Joe, I just wondering how many persons are going to occupy the part of the house that you guys are going to keep that you're not going to rent out? How many persons reside there?
So it's my wife, myself, and my mother-in-law.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Wow, there's no questions tonight. Imagine that. Well, while you're there, we had a letter that was received regarding your conditional use permit. I'll just read it into the record because I haven't had a chance to read it yet. And then if there's something that, and I know I don't have to do that, but
Just wonder if you want to wait until
ask him questions.
positive testimony first.
Well, actually, I think this one is.
Okay. Yeah, I read the wrong one.
Oh, this one? With the Itani address?
Yes.
It's the neighbor?
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
All right. This is from Ann and Dwayne Wessels. They live at 2512 Itani Drive. Dear Board of Adjustments, we appreciate the opportunity to provide input regarding the conditional use permit for the Bed and Breakfast Inn at 2518 Itani Drive in Moscow. As immediate neighbors to the applicant's property, we have concerns about the proposed use. Our primary concern is an increase in the number of non-resident guests that may be present in our neighborhood. This includes concerns about noise, safety, and parking. The presence of bed and breakfast inn guests may lead to an increase in noise as people come and go at various times of the day and night, and perhaps utilize outside spaces of the property. We are additionally concerned about the effect on property value in our neighborhood. We feel the most potential home buyer would prefer not to live next to a bed and breakfast inn with a revolving door of non-resident guests. At the same time, we are a little puzzled by the CUP request, as we understand no special permits are required within the city of Moscow for Airbnb type uses. To the best of our knowledge, there are very few in any bed and breakfast inns within the city of the Moscow R2 zone. If the intended use is for short-term stays, it is unclear to us why the CUP is necessary. We urge the Board of Adjustments to deny the conditional use permit. So the reason I wanted to read that into the record is no one has had this information until now. And so as the applicant, I would like your take on this.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak about it. This is also our first opportunity to see the letter, so thank you for providing it. I realize it came in late. So the second and third paragraph, it looks like, are what the Wessels 2 points are. Looking at the first point, to summarize it, it is guests, non-resident guests, the number of them could be increased in our neighborhood. And I personally looked at Airbnb and rental by owner, those kind of websites, and there are none in our neighborhood within 1,500, 2,000 feet. I mean, it's wide open. So I'm not sure what other homes they're referencing.
Okay.
So, because I was curious myself if there were other homes in the neighborhood, and I was very surprised to see that there weren't. Now, there is a home on Panorama. It's up and to the north of us, but I do not know if that's a legally licensed home. And so that's, we're trying to obviously do this legally. And I wasn't passing judgment on that house. And there's another house probably within a half a mile as the crow flies that shows up on rental sites. But again, I have no indication to suggest that they're also a permitted home. So what people are doing legally or not, I do not know, but we're trying to do this the legal way. And I don't have any impression that there are great numbers or any numbers of non-resident guests that are choking up the neighborhood. As far as noise, safety, and parking go, we've already established that there's ample parking. At least we're one of the few neighborhoods in Moscow, it seems. We're fairly new here, but my impression is that there's some shortage of parking in some neighborhoods, but we're fortunate that that is not the case for us. And then we have the driveway parking and garage parking as well. Noise and safety. We have anticipated for noise, we'll have a written policy that check-in is no later than 10 p.m. So we will be controlling that feature for any kind of evening noise. It's not like Aitani is a quiet neighborhood. I wouldn't suggest that at all. We have neighbors tightly packed in, as you could see from the aerial shot up there. And we're the quietest house on the block with just my wife and I and my mother-in-law. Our immediate guests or our immediate neighbors all have dogs, many of whom are out during the day and early evening and barking. We don't have any pets. We don't contribute to the noise level at all. Nothing against the dogs, but that's just the fact that there is animal noise out there. And then on the second point, property values. Now that's a purely speculative thing, and I tend to be relying on data, and I don't see any data in there that I could hang anything on. So I'll just leave it to you to determine the speculative nature of that one. And I think that's it as far as the 2 points that they were making that I could possibly address.
We've actually had several B&B CUPs recently. That it's becoming a more common thing. What is the frequency you expect of having guests?
Well, looking ahead at Moscow's calendar for the next 12 months, there are quite a few community events. So it will be completely driven by visitors coming into Moscow, first of all. And second of all, another factor that drives the success of a home to be occupied is its rental rate, how much the room is rented for. And we haven't decided yet where we're going to land in that spot. We're also probably not going to rent full weekends out. So that'll be limiting some of the available prospective renters, because we would probably just primarily look at Monday through Friday, occasional Saturdays. So,
All right. Any other questions?
One
Yes,
quick
sir.
question. Where is the Wessel's house in location to yours?
So if you reflect on the picture that was there of the front of the house, there to the left and down Aitani,
Okay.
immediately next door.
How many homes separate would you say?
They're right next door.
Oh, they're right next
Right
door.
next door, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, their garage immediately is closest to us.
Yep.
And then we will also have a general noise policy. So we have basically an enclosed front porch that'll be accessible to guests, and there will be nobody out in our backyard at all. That'll just be private space for us. And on the front side of the house, which is where the enclosed porch is, that's where all the roadside traffic is. So there's nothing quiet about Aitani, as I said earlier, and that roadside traffic is where, if they were outside during summer months, then that would be a thing, but it's not an air-conditioned space at all. there's not even a ceiling fan or anything. It's just an enclosed porch. So it would be, I don't anticipate that porch getting lots of outdoor use. So either the neighbor's dogs or just the regular routine noise that's on Itani would be most likely what they're hearing. Sorry.
I found it interesting that you said you prefer to have people come into the week. In fact, you won't even make it available. And I realize you can change your mind for the weekend, where I see with the university and events, that's normally when the hotel rooms are hard to find. And we
Yes.
think people would look for B&B over the homecoming, whatever the case may be. So what type of market do you think are the people who are going to most likely be drawn to your B&B?
So it'll be weekday, week-long visitors somewhere in that space. The primary reason that we're not renting it out on weekends is because we have 16 grandchildren, and we have a lot of noise at our house on the weekend just from our 16 grandchildren. And we try to do family dinners at our house because we're the grandparents here in town. So that's the reason why we're not leaning towards doing it. And with 16 grandkids, by the way, they're all age 11 and under. So it's a pretty noisy gathering.
That's not obviously going to change.
No. So beyond that, we're just,
when you have guests.
beg your pardon?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, our family visits on the weekends are definitely the noisy part of our life. And we also thought it would be better for our guests if they didn't have to put up with all the noise, right, from all 16 kids.
Yeah, I can see they wouldn't last very long.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I apologize for leaning strangely like this. The drawer is out on this thing and I can't figure out how to make it go in. So I'm.
That's by design.
Don't get too familiar with the microphone.
Make it awkward for you.
Any more questions for Mr. Wright?
Not at this time.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
With that, is there anybody that would care to come up and speak in favor of this application? Okay. That said, is there anybody that would come up and like to speak otherwise? Please come up one at a time and state your name and address into the mic for the record.
Hi, my name is Pat Carney, and I live at 2715 Atani. I appreciate what Mr. Wright said, that we are not a quiet neighborhood. We actually are a pretty quiet neighborhood. The only thing that makes noise are the young children in the neighborhood. So if it's an increase in traffic, I'm certainly opposed to that. Also, he said parking was not a problem. Every time I drive by that house, there are 2 cars in the driveway and there are 2 cars parked on the street in front of the house. So there's actually not another parking space at the house. You would have to park around the corner on a dead-end street. There is no parking on the other side of the street, so that's not an option. So in the wintertime, when the snowplow comes, it pretty much covers up the 2 cars on the street, with a big snowbank. And when people put their trash cans out on the other side of the street, it's hard to get through there with the ice and the snow. The summer, not so much. But like I said, in the summer, there's lots of children out playing in the neighborhood, people walking their dogs, or just elderly like myself out walking on the sidewalks. And I am opposed for any kind of bed and breakfast in our neighborhood. We don't want a multi-use neighborhood. We like our regular neighborhood as it is. I'm sure that's why when I moved here 5.5 years ago, that was one thing I looked for, was a quiet neighborhood with nice neighbors. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Charlotte Windley. I live at 424 Panorama Drive, which is on the corner of Panorama and Itani. I've lived there 8 years. I chose that neighborhood because it is a residential neighborhood, single family dwellings. And I really would like it to stay that way, not to make this a personal argument, but I just love the neighborhood the way it is. And, you know, once we say yes to one CUP, we can't say no to any of the others. So essentially, we're rezoning the neighborhood with the decision tonight, and I would be very much opposed to that. I would like to keep the neighborhood the way it is. I would like to echo Pat's comments about the parking. I drive up and down that street quite often, and it really is difficult. The other side of the street says no parking, but that tends to be ignored, especially by construction vehicles, delivery vehicles, people who are unfamiliar with the neighborhood. It just gets ignored. And then we have cars on both sides, and then it really is a narrow one-way street. And so the traffic, the parking is difficult, that you just can't get around that. And there are already several cars that are usually parked out, as Pat said. So again, I repeat myself, but I just want to say how important I just feel that I love the neighborhood. My son lives a couple of doors to the other side of me, and I echo his sentiments as well. We just like to keep the neighborhood the way it is, zoned residential, single family. And I thank you for your time.
I'll stand off the side. Brant Schroeder, I'm at 515 Panorama Drive. And mine's just the same thing. I purchased a home up there about 12 years ago, specifically because it's a single family homes. And that's the way I'd like to keep it. I've got 4 kids that I'm raising. Well, one just moved out of the house, but he's there quite frequently. So can't get rid of him yet. But we're probably one of the noisier homes in that area because all the kids play at my house. But that's why we like it, is because it's residential and we have a lot of kids and families growing up there. So
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cade Cohn. I live at 2515 Itani. My house is just right across the street to the south. We're the ones that don't have any parking on our side. I can attest to one of the people that came up today that I've lived there across the street from the applicant for probably 3 or 4 years now. And generally there's always at least 2 cars in the parking lot in front of the driveway, and usually there's one on the street. And it has been a problem with the snowplows that I've talked to trying to get around there because it's pretty narrow. When you add a UPS or a FedEx truck, people are stopping, coming up and down. And I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit and wanting to try to do something, but it just seems like when I moved in, my CCNR said that this was a single family dwellings, should be used for residential only. It just seems like we should try to keep it that way. One person said, we start this, it kind of just continues on. If you approve this, when's the next person's going to do an Airbnb or some type of bed and breakfast? It just doesn't seem like it ends. So I guess I'd ask you to oppose this. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because we've heard it a couple of times about there's always a car or 2 parked. Is it always the same cars?
Generally, yeah. And it's parked where I almost hit it every time I back out. So it's,
Any idea who might own it?
I have no idea. It's a white, I think, Honda Prius. It's one of theirs, I'm assuming. Yeah. They're all white. Yeah, so is mine. You have to have a white car to live in our neighborhood, apparently. But yeah, no, there's one always parked kind of right as I back out of my garage. And then there's always 2 in the driveway itself. So if there's going to be people coming and going, unless something changes with their parking inside the parking, inside of their garage structure, there's going to be people that come here that are going to be a purchaser of this Airbnb. It's probably going to be parked on the street, more than likely. So, any more questions for me? Thank you.
No, thank you. Would anybody else care to come up and speak about this CUP? Okay, that said, I'll give the applicant a chance to come up and address what sounds like parking concerns. If you want, please state your name again.
And I'll follow suit and stand over to the side here. It's John Wright. So first of all, for the record, there are no CCNRs attached to our property whatsoever. So that is the case. Otherwise, we wouldn't have bought the house. Regarding winter parking, we only park on the side of the Itani, which is a wide street that has parking available. On the other side of the street, it is clearly marked no parking because it's a winter route. So that's a data point. On our side of the street, it is true that if there is snow, then I have to get out with my snow blower and clear parking for me to park, which I do, and I would continue to do. So there's no change there. The picture that showed parking for the garage, the driveway, and the street is an accurate depiction of the parking spots that are available. Because we're not talking about renting out 3 or 4 rooms, but a single space with a car, there's still ample parking in front of our house without impinging on what anybody else is doing. There was a comment that contractors park on that side of the street, as well as this side of the street that's marked no parking. That's true, but those aren't contractors associated with our home. They're actually associated with one of the presenters here this evening. I'm trying to think if there were any other points that I could respond to with actual data. I don't anticipate there being any parking because, like I said, we have ample 2 directly in front of our house that we use. When we have family gathering events, which we do on the weekends that I referred to, we are 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 cars deep up and down the street. But we're not unique in that usage. There are plenty of other family or graduation or other events that happen from all of our neighbors parking up and down that side of the street. We all have to park on the same side, but there's ample parking and it's a wide street. During snow, when the snow plows come through, it's our choice if we want to have the snow plowed into the front of our house where we would normally park, or if I have to get my car out of the way or get my snow blower out there and do the work myself. I've never had any complaints personally about how the snow gets managed. If I want to be able to unearth my car, then I work around it. We're fairly new to Moscow, so I didn't know that the first year that we were on Itani, and our car did get buried for several months by the snow blower, the snow plow. So, but we got that under management, and I'm just trying to think about how that particular snow situation affects any of the neighbors. If we're removing the snow so that we can park on the street, then which we did this year just for our own benefit and would continue to do so, then I don't see how that's an impact on anybody directly in front of our house. So that would be my clarifying responses. Any
You
questions?
say you have 2 parking places in front of the house. Is that the pad parking in front of your garage, or is that out on the street?
Yeah, that picture in your left hand there, that is out on the street. Those are the 2 parking spots directly in front of the house.
Okay, well, that's open parking, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Anybody can park there, and they do.
Yes.
Yeah, John, I'm looking at the same picture that Tim was there. It looks to me like on the one side of the driveway, is that just a gravel landscaped area there
It is.
on the one side? So a person could actually park on that graveled landscape part?
Yes, yes.
And how wide is that?
Well, it's about the width of a Prius,
The width of what?
of a Toyota Prius.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I notice on the other side of the garage, it doesn't looks like the existing driveway doesn't actually match up with the left side of the garage. Is there a space there also, or like a couple feet or something like that?
So as you're looking at the front of the house on the left-hand side,
Yes. No, as you're looking
Right.
from the street down the driveway to the garage, it looks like there's some grass or something that doesn't extend clear over to match up with the garage. Is that accurate?
so as you're looking at the house on the right-hand side is where the gravel bed is. It's about
I'm
the width
talking
of the
about
Prius.
on the left-hand side.
The left-hand side. Okay. Yeah, that's just front yard. At this point, it is grassed in front yard. We are considering taking the.
Thanks, Amy. You read my mind. Sorry, Mr. Ray.
If you can see, the driveway is actually made of individually laid bricks. And so to the left, we have been contemplating taking out that plum tree and then bringing the porous surface over to the left to expand on premises
Okay.
parking.
Yeah, what I'm getting at, is it possible to extend the driveway width to accommodate a couple of vehicles?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the, and I apologize, I don't know their last name, but it was the people to the left of us. They do use the small driveway to the right on their property for additional parking.
Mhm.
We've just never gotten into the habit of doing that.
I have a question for clarification while you're back up there. When, as a Airbnb and a bed and breakfast, are your guests occupying while you're occupying, or are you gone when they're there?
It can be either way. We're not going to limit having guests on a day-to-day basis when we're just like at the grocery store or something. If we're out of town, we probably will not have people in the house other than just family. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So you will still be residing in the house at the time the guests are as well.
Yes, we live there. It's our only home, and we will be there.
The reason I ask is sometimes I've used Airbnbs and the owners aren't there at the time that the guest is.
Yes,
And others, they actually prepare a meal for you. And so I just didn't know what your process.
yeah,
how
we
you
don't
plan.
anticipate being either of those scenarios. We're not actually going to do meal prep. And if we have guests, then we will be in town, in the house, with the exception if we're going to like the grocery store to do errands or what have you. But like I said, if we're going to be out of town, then we won't be renting the room.
And if I could quickly interject, just to provide some clarity around short-term rentals versus Airbnbs. Short-term rentals, by Idaho state law, states and counties are not allowed to regulate them. So when a person rents out the entire home, that's permitted by right within the city. Because he's residing within the home and renting out a bedroom, that is considered a bed and breakfast. So that's the distinction there. Because he will be residing within the home, it fell within the category of a bed and breakfast rather than a short-term rental.
Thanks, Amy. Okay.
We felt like it added a little bit of confusion having the bed and breakfast title in there, but we totally get why the code reads that way. But we're just renting out a room and not actually having a full-on bed and breakfast in there as the notice says. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Marshall, just for clarification, when you were talking about the gravelled spot, are you talking about the tree lawn or the tree gravel?
No,
Since it's not-
I was talking
You're
about,
talking
see where
about
that
the-
little
where the-
retaining wall on the right,
Retaining wall, okay, over there, okay.
up against that.
Sweet.
And then perhaps extending the driveway to the left
Back this way,
a
yeah.
couple of feet.
Yeah, so that's what I said. We're contemplating extending the porous material in the driveway. It's just hand-laid brick. We have some landscaping sprinkler system that we have to move in order to do that, but
So that's not city right away, huh?
no. And
Blocking the curb?
we've been contemplated doing that regardless of what we do with the room. So
As far as parking is concerned for a bed and
Yeah, I
breakfast,
know
so a
that.
single-family residence requires 2 parking spaces for any home with up to 4 bedrooms. With the addition of the Airbnb or with the addition of the bed and breakfast, each room requires 0.5 parking spaces. So this use really only requires a total of 3 parking spaces by city zoning code. So with the 2-car garage and the 2-car parking pad in the driveway, it does meet the required parking code.
But we can supersede that
Correct.
parking code and put additional conditions on there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even though you barricade the 2 cars in the garage, you still get to count those too?
Yep, you do, because that'll be new.
All right.
And did I read in?
Wait,
the-
hold
Oh, sorry.
on. Do we have any more questions for the applicant?
Yes,
We'll let him sit if we don't have any more for him.
yes.
Okay.
Did I read in the application that you intend to fix the garage door so that you can park in the garage?
there's no
The other
reference. There's no reference in
Never mind.
ours. Yeah.
I withdraw my question.
Okay.
I'm curious.
Steve, any questions? Any more questions for the applicant?
All right. Thank you again.
No, actually, our public part of this is now over. That's why I gave him the last chance.
There were just some incorrect statements that I don't agree with in that.
That happens a lot in these. So within our discussion, hopefully we will address those. Question for Amy. There's been comments about zoning and changing the zoning. We're not doing any zoning change in this residence, correct?
That's correct. This is a conditionally permitted use within the R2 zoning designation.
So these are allowed in an R2 zone without rezoning the R2.
Correct.
Okay, that's one clarification. I wanted correction. It may or may not have been that gentleman's. So
Joe, and I think kind of along those lines, because we've heard it more than once, was regardless of what we decide, if we should go ahead with that, then we have set a new precedent, and this will be just one of many. And I would like to say, from my point of view, we never set precedent. Each case stands on its own, and we may elect to do one thing for one and another for another. We're not here to change the zone of the city's ordinance here. We're here to identify what we're allowed to have the power to do here.
also what's come up, I think I can clarify. We're talking, Marshall was referring to the side, what I believe is probably a 5-foot wide side yard setback on what I believe is the east side of the house, not the gravel area out by the little plum tree. So that's why a Prius might fit there, but a standard car
It could be,
probably
it could be
wouldn't.
larger than 5 feet.
True,
That'd
but
be the minimum.
that would be the minimum that a developer would have had to provide in that neighborhood. So that realistically, it's probably in that range. But that's the area that we're talking about in the width. Comments, questions,
I'll
thoughts?
make a couple of comments. Number one, I don't like the city street standard with parking on only one side of the street, but that's neither here nor there for this discussion. Number two, I think there's a need in this city for some bread and breakfasts and things, because otherwise the city's overwhelmed and people are actually going to Lewiston and Pullman and stuff when there's an event here. So I think there's a real need for some additional places like this to go. Parking is a big problem, and snow removal is a big problem. And it apparently is a narrower street because of parking only on one side. I think that additional parking could be employed off-street in this situation, even though Amy said that they meet the requirement already for off-street parking. But in a situation like this, I think I would make that a condition to have a minimum of 4 off-street parking places. But I don't know how the rest of you feel.
And how would they go about doing that again, Marshall?
Well, I'm not a designer. I would leave that up to the applicant to.
So with the garage and the driveway, there is a total of 4.
Okay.
It's just how the resident and owner chooses to park within those is kind of out of our control.
In other words, what I'm trying to think
There's,
about. Go ahead.
let me finish. So, but the application is asking for a maximum of 4 additional.
No.
No.
So the applicant is providing 2 parking spaces for the bed and breakfast guest, and in addition has the 2-car garage. So the total would be 4 for the residents that live there, and then the 2. The requirement would be 3 for the use and the residents.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Sure.
The thoughts?
I have a question for the city. I'm somewhat familiar with conditional use permits and having terms to those conditional use permit. And so I'm wondering if the Board of Adjustment has the ability to set terms to the conditional use permit so that it would be a time frame, and then the conditional use permit would expire, and that they could reapply.
So typically within the guidelines of a conditional use permit, once the use has started, that it is allowed to continue. As far as setting a time limit for a conditional use permit, or a condition in regards to a time, you are able to, let's see, minimize adverse impacts on the development, control the sequence and timing of the development, control the duration of the development, assure the development is maintained properly. Let's see, where I'm losing my place. That the site and public facilities and services are adequate. Require more restrictive standards than those generally required by the ordinance, and require mitigation effects for the proposed development upon service delivery by a political subdivision, including schools, districts, providing services within planning jurisdiction. So I think that to give it an expiration date would potentially fall
Under number 3,
under number 3,
right.
controlling the duration.
And I would say,
That does specifically speak to development too. It does use the word development, and this isn't necessarily a development or a building that's being constructed.
Mhm.
So it'd be kind of a tricky, slippery slope there, how that's to be interpreted.
we have in the past added a condition
Mhm.
for a conditional use to be revisited after a year. So for instance, you make a proposal that we add a parking stall, and we could have a second condition that goes with that to say, okay, after a year, if we require the applicant to add the stall in a year, have another CUP and see if that actually worked or didn't work. So to answer your question, yes, we can make that a condition if we so chose, or if it was, someone proposed it.
A condition of what? I mean,
A condition of the
just in other words,
CUP,
well,
Condition that the
They have to
CUP,
because we're giving them the use to, the right to be able to use the facility as they see fit now, but we're setting a precedent as well. Whether we are or not in the neighborhood, we probably are. At any rate, we would be able to have the applicant come back, the CUP would expire, and they would have to come back and apply for a new CUP, and then they would either meet the conditions that we had imposed on them for the CUP, or like Marshall says, having another parking spot there or something, whatever it is that we might lay out as a requirement.
what if we had no condition? We just said, you have your conditional use permit for 2 years, and then it expires, meaning they likely come back. And I'm just trying to anticipate what will be different.
conjecture. A lot of this is us doing our best, all of us in this room, to try to figure out how this plays out. And all of that particular condition, which we don't do a lot, but all that particular condition does is say, hey, we think we're making the right decision, but let's revisit it later and make sure or re-verify that it is working or isn't working.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to anticipate the dynamics in the neighborhood under those circumstances.
Well, I've mentioned this before in multiple CUPs over the years. The parking on the street, that's first come, first serve. It's not the person who lives right behind that section of the house. That's typically who parks there, but that's not a parking spot, so we can't count that. The snowplow issue, that's a valid issue as well. I kind of blame the city a little bit on that, because it sounds like they plow the snow to the one side of the street that you can park and not to the other side. Or maybe both ways, but I done the same thing. I live across the street from a park, and I'm on a snow route as well. So I have to move the snow. There's parking on both sides of my street. However, there's a park on the other side of my street. So I actually shovel the snow by hand to the other side of the street where no one parks anyway. But that's just kind of the thing about neighborhoods, they're all different. But this one obviously is kind of single loaded, so to speak. Which to me would kind of validate that we kind of put the monkey on the back of the applicant a little bit to provide an additional parking stall, specifically if they're still there at the time. I was thinking if the applicant wasn't there at the time the other person was, then that's a spot for a spot, but it's not.
Another thing, Tim, not to interrupt you, but another thing, Tim, is that the applicant said that they have some guidelines that they're going to be imposing on their guests. We don't have copies of those to know what those guidelines might be. And so those guidelines might fit in with the neighborhood very nicely, and there might be issues down the road that we don't know about that, you know.
Well, and then it comes into enforcement and all that, so, yeah.
Well, and if the applicant or if the guests are actually a weekday guest, they're not in town for a weekend game. So they may not even be, they might be there to stay for the evening, but chances are they're there for some kind of business and may not even be there during the daytime. So they'd be like every other resident there that leaves to go to work and comes back. Marshall?
Well, Joe, I guess I'm prepared to make a motion. And I'm going to premise it on, I guess I'm a realist. Most double car garages, you can't fit 2 cars in. By the time you put a freezer and a workbench and bicycles and whatever, but that's just because I'm a realist. So with that, I would make the motion to approve the conditional use permit with the condition that the parking pad, the driveway, would need to accommodate 4 vehicles. And I would not put a timeline on coming back to renew the conditional use permit. I would just put those conditions on it.
So you're leaning towards having the front yard wide enough for 4 stalls?
Yes, the driveway to be wide enough, and they can stack them, 2 and 2, just so that 4 vehicles.
Tandem parking?
Yeah, 4 vehicles the driveway area can accommodate 4 vehicles. And I'm not gonna tell the applicant how he has to do it.
Right.
So I will say that the driveway itself usually accommodates 2 vehicles. Anything past the sidewalk is actually public right of way and wouldn't be allowed for
Correct, but
parking.
isn't there 25 feet from the sidewalk to that garage?
I'm not entirely sure of the setback. I think the site
Approximately.
plan may show that.
Yeah.
But each parking stall, the standard required parking stall is 20 feet by 9 feet. So it really can only accommodate 2 cars within that driveway space. So
That's why I suggested that they widen the driveway space.
the other issue with that is that the city standard for a driveway width is typically 20 feet wide. I think engineering can approve up to a 30-inch or 30-foot approach. So it presents some challenges there.
But you realize these are rolled curbs and they're not drop curbs.
Right.
They're rolled curbs, and once they pass the sidewalk, then it's on private property.
Yes.
True, but if we think in terms of the neighborhood being a residential neighborhood, 4 parking stall width on the front is a parking lot, and that would, in my opinion, become that's not
Joe,
what the
They could
neighborhood.
put concrete on all of their lawn if they wanted to.
Well, they could, and we have had a conditional use permit based on that very thing.
Well,
But in terms of just the neighborhood itself, the look of the aesthetic of the neighborhood,
Mhm.
that would be interjecting something different. That would be out of character.
They-
Let me use a term that's in our 70s.
they
Out of
could
character.
do it without asking anybody's permission.
That they could, and that's what happened last.
But they're asking us for our permission now.
Right.
Yeah. But if you look at that photograph there, it's already you got gravel on most of the right side there.
Well,
So
there's no question about expanding it to the right. But widening the driveway to take over some of the yard seems a little.
I mean, I obviously can be done, but
Yeah, well,
I think, yeah.
I'm not going to design it.
Yeah, me either. But you could easily get 3 cars parked in there side by side between the retaining wall and the sidewalk without going further than that. I don't know that a person could get 4. That would become, especially without a wider curb cut. But again, we're not here to design it for them. So that said, I'd entertain a motion. Can't get anywhere without a motion.
I already made the motion.
You already made the motion.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. Approve it with conditions.
Oh, I'm sorry. You did, but I didn't hear your conditions.
That they accommodate
4?
4.
Okay.
So your motion would be to approve it with the condition that there are 6 parking stalls provided.
Well,
Because of 2 in the garage.
if you can consider maybe 2 in the garage.
City does, I guess.
Yes.
It does. So to clarify the motion, it's to approve this with one condition to add 4 on-site parking stalls in addition to the 2 garage stalls and no time.
Yeah, no time. It's just, they don't need to come back and reapply.
Okay. So I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. I have a motion. I have a second. So we'll go down the line. Actually, we'll start with you since you seconded the motion. Steve,
Aye.
Marshall,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Jerry. And I'm a no as well, but that's still 3-2. And so the motion passes.
Well, you might ask for additional comment on their, you voted no, Jerry?
I voted. no.
I'd love to hear Jerry's comment.
I've got 2. Rolling Hills 7, Rolling Hills 5, Rolling Hills 6 were all single-family homes. If you get out to the Harrison area, those are all R3s. They're supposed to be multifamily. In a configuration in the neighborhood, I just have a problem dropping an Airbnb in this one. I mean, rental bedrooms, even though it's only 2 bedrooms. He does it. The neighbor does it. The next neighbor does it. We already have a parking problem in Moscow because Moscow doesn't think that we have cars. We had that same problem on Vandal Drive when all of a sudden we have 6 people living in there and each one of those people have 6 cars. I understand that the applicant is saying that they're only going to rent it during the week because they have weekend family gatherings. Again, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. If they rent it out on a weekend, the family just doesn't come. Or if the family does come, they're at a game or something else. And again, I just have a parking problem issue because I am not a person who likes the street parking for any house. I mean, the street parking is designed for visitors that are there for short term. We've already had the neighbors saying that it's permanent parking for each of the families. So I just don't see this as in character with the neighborhood. And so that's really where I'm having the biggest heartburn.
Amy, how many?
If they were now, if I would entertain, if you were to timeline it so that within 12 months or 24 months, they were to come back to renew the CUP and the neighborhood hadn't been adversely affected, I would be more inclined to approve that because then I would be able to look at it in a further out horizon to say, yeah, okay, it isn't as bad as it could be. But being the person who, I mean, I tend to be an optimist, but in this point, like you, I'm a realist. And once you give a little, you're going to take some more.
Amy, could you tell us approximately how many bed and breakfasts or similar situations are in the Rolling Hills area that that we've given conditional use permits
I
to?
I can't recall any in the Rolling Hills neighborhood that have gone through the conditional use permit application process. I can't say that there aren't any. We don't typically go out and look for ones that are violating zoning code, but if there's a complaint made, then we'll follow up. I will say that there are residential short-term rentals permitted by right because it does not require this conditional use permit process. And so I'm quite certain that there are many of those throughout town. But specifically bed and breakfast conditional use permits in the last at least 3 years, I don't know of any in this neighborhood.
Thanks, Ian.
Sure.
So Joe, you didn't vote.
2 reasons. The second, third, and fourth of our 7 conditional use requirements really kind of addressed the parking. And I was kind of hoping that someone would add a time frame to come back and revisit it because, like I said, we're trying to make the right decision, but we don't know for sure. But our fourth criteria is the location, design, and size of the proposed use will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. If you could park on both sides of this street, this is a B&B like all the others that we've had over the past several years, and I would have had no issue with it at all. And so, but the surrounding neighbors don't even have a chance to park on that side of the street because they can't. And of course, this time of year, snow is on our minds. If this was summertime, it would be less of a concern, but it is, and the trash cans have to go somewhere. And so because of that, I think it's a valid use. It meets the other criteria. But without us adding the extra parking, I think 1 for 1 guest. I don't think 2 is, I think 2 is excessive and then would become out of, it wouldn't meet the look of the surroundings. So I think that's excessive, and how they do it, if we don't have a time frame to come back, the neighbors may hate 4 parking stalls across the street from them. I don't know the answer to that. And so basically because of criteria 4, that's why I disagreed. But Amy, we have a motion. It's passed 3-2. Unless one of the 3 of you are changing your mind, it is what it is, correct?
Well, the issue is parking, and Marshall's motion addresses that. So that's, I don't know particularly, I'm trying to visualize how this is going to look, and it doesn't seem to be very attractive to me, but it doesn't make any difference how I feel about that. The fact is the motion addresses the issue that seems to be the biggest complaint by the neighbors.
I mean, my concern is like Cade living across the street there, that he can't hardly back out sometimes. And snow removal is a big deal. And I mean, we can't tell people they can't park on the street,
Right.
but if we accommodate a place for people to get off the street, or if the applicant could politely ask their renters, could you please park here? Then that helps with the problem.
And that's why I kind of leaning towards having some kind of a time frame so that once you get the SUP, then they're out the door and they're gone, and they don't have any time frame. They have to come back, and it's a done deal. And one question they don't have is, does it run with the land? And so if they sell the property, does the SUP automatically run with the land and to the next?
That I know. That we've had that issue. That issue's come
So
up before. So as soon as
Well-
that applicant sells their house, this CUP.
I would disagree. I live in an R2 neighborhood, and I can accommodate 8 vehicles at my house. So it's an R2 neighborhood. The next door neighbor to me is an R2 neighborhood. He can accommodate 6 vehicles on his front. So just because it's an R2 doesn't mean that they can't utilize the space.
Yeah, I wasn't opposed to this because of the zoning. I've got 4 kids and basically the same street frontage, so we manage. I'm concerned about, well, what I already stated. I agree with adding one. I don't agree with adding two, but that's,
Yeah, I just think it would be wise to have the SUP have a time frame so they could have to come back and readdress the issue as to whether or not they accommodated the parking on the off the street and whether or not it became.
If they accommodated the parking off the street with my
If-
motion, if they didn't, the neighbors have the right to come to
that's my
planning
question. If,
department and say they're not following through with the condition.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you did choose to make that a condition.
which we did and
it would-
approved.
It would be.
4 stalls in front.
They would need to provide that parking stall before the use could commence. It would be the same as if you were looking at a different application where a building was needing to be constructed, they would have to fulfill that requirement before they could. Unless you chose to make a timeline, then it must be provided by in 6 months.
I didn't choose to put a timeline on it.
Right. So as I understand it, at this point, this is approved and they will have to provide 4 spots for parking and
6.
6.
well, 4 outside of the garage.
Yeah.
So the 2 in the garage, because as you said,
And there are many times when they would never be used.
so the neighbors would have the repercussion if the 4 stalls are there or aren't there or don't solve the problem, becomes a nuisance, which is one of the things, then they can go to the city and the city could, but
That
Yeah.
becomes a difficult thing. So actually enforcing that and for the city to track, is somebody parking in that spot? Who owns this car and is it associated with this would be a very difficult thing to follow up on a regular basis. So it would be difficult for the city to say, yeah, if they're not parking in the driveway, then give us a call and we'll make sure they do that. It would be a violation of this CUP if it's the same principle as the garage. When homes are built and they provide a 2-car garage, they are satisfying that parking requirement for that use. As we all know, not many people use their garages for their cars, but they have provided the space. And so that's kind of why you see that off-site parking, why you oftentimes see people park in that right of way, because it's a very difficult thing to enforce that somebody actually uses their driveway or actually uses their garage. Zoning code requires that you satisfy a certain amount of spaces per use. This particular use and structure requires 3 parking stalls. Given that they've showed us that on the site plan, they have that use. That's kind of where we're limited. They can provide the space, but there's no guarantee that they're going to continue using that for parking, just as the garage.
Right.
So it would put the city in a tricky position, is, I guess, the short response.
so
It's done.
I think we're done. I didn't get my way, but we're done.
We got to
but-
task the staff to
Yes,
prepare the,
Draft relevant criteria and standards
with the condition in there.
with the
And-
condition that 6
and if
parking
the
spaces are
applicant-
provided.
Chooses to reduce the number of guests that might be there,
They would have to come back and amend the
they'd have
CU.
to come back,
Mhm.
right? Or if they chose not to construct the condition, that's their right too. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It only means you have to do it if you're going to have guests.
So I need a motion to direct the staff to provide a relative criteria and findings of fact.
I'll make a motion that the staff provide the relevant criteria and standards for our current hearing.
Thank you. So I have a motion now. I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. We'll go down the line again. Steve.
Aye.
Marshall. Tim.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Aye. So that's unanimous. So that's the first one of 2. We have 2 tonight. So.
So the second conditional use permit for tonight, I also am going to have to lean in because I don't know what's up with this.
I saw them try to
board.
fix the door and it couldn't, so.
Right, and I tried before the meeting, I couldn't figure it out either, so I'm not quite sure. We'll make it work. Left the clicker on the table.
These are so hard on the neighborhood. Gosh. That's why I thought, having a period of time, that's just gonna keep them at each other's necks for a year or two and say. Pictures and, yeah, better just to know.
Okay,
So, minimum of 5 feet, I'd be really curious to know what it is.
I don't bet it's 5. At the time of this, I don't bet that the developer minimized the side yard setback.
I'll speak loudly into the mic. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay. Okay, so this conditional use permit is for 402 Lincoln Street. The applicant is proposing a conditional use permit to allow 6 unrelated individuals within a single-family home in the moderate density single-family zoning district. Current zoning code allows for 4 unrelated individuals to reside in a single-family home as a permitted use. The applicant is requesting the conditional use permit to allow 6 unrelated individuals, so that's an increase of what is allowed by right by 2. The main floor is currently occupied by the applicant's daughter and 2 unrelated individuals, and the applicant would like to use the basement as a short-term rental. Guests would have access to 1 bed. The space to be rented will accommodate no more than 3 adults per stay, bringing that total of unrelated individuals to 6 at any one time. This is the subject property east of Lincoln, north of C Street, and south of D Street. It's a closer photo of the subject property. As you can see, it's on a corner, so it has frontage on Lincoln and C Street. This is the subject property from the front. If you ever take walks in the surrounding neighborhood, you're probably very familiar with the property. This is from the corner, so you can see the frontage along Lincoln Street as well as C Street. This is a site plan of the subject property. Lincoln over on this side and C Street over on this side. First level floor plan shows 3 bedrooms, a living area, a dining room, and a kitchen. There's a front entrance here and an entrance in the rear with a mudroom, access to downstairs, which takes you into a laundry area, utility area, kitchen, bonus room, sleeping area, and then a sitting area. This subject property, as I stated, is zoned R2, moderate density, single family residential district. The subject property is 11,493 square feet. It has 100 feet of frontage on Lincoln and 125 feet along C Street. The surrounding properties to the north, east, and south all consist of single-family residents. The property to the west across the street, across Lincoln, is the location of St. Mary's School. Lincoln Street is a 30-foot wide street with tree lawn and sidewalk on the east side of the street and on the west. Staff's recommendation tonight would be to approve the conditional use permit for up to 6 unrelated individuals and direct staff to prepare the relevant criteria and standards. I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
Amy, I may have missed it. Did you say there's already 3 unrelated individuals living there?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Amy, along that, could you define unrelated individual?
I sure can.
I don't know if that means it can be cousins, or you just don't know the other people, or
So
Family?
as far as unrelated individuals, I'll read you the definition of family. I can get to it. I should have put a slide. I thought about it, but I didn't. So a family, for the purposes of this definition, shall mean related shall mean person of related by blood, marriage, adoption, guardianship, or other duly authorized relationship. A family shall not mean a society, a club, a fraternity, a sorority, association, lodge, Federation Bed and Breakfast Inn, boarding house, residential rental unit, or other. Number 3, there shall be no more than one family per dwelling unit, unless otherwise stated by this code. Let's skip the living together as a housekeeping unit because that doesn't apply. Related by blood shall mean a person related in combination with the following: parents, step-parents, children, stepchildren, siblings, step-siblings, half-siblings, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, grandparents, grandchildren, great-grandparents, great-grandchildren, and first cousins. Furthermore, the next part probably wouldn't apply. It just goes into more than one related individual living in a single housekeeping unit or dwelling unit. So that kind of it gives you the unrelated
So-
individual.
So we're talking about 6 unrelated individuals potentially in this house. One is a daughter of the owner,
Correct,
already with 2 unrelated,
correct,
and they want to be able to use the basement for 3 more unrelated.
correct.
So those are 6 people who are unrelated
Yes.
in this house.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question, and it has to do with your comment. They already exceed by 2 people by right?
So-
Can you clarify that?
Absolutely. So by right, you were allowed to have 4 people that are unrelated reside in a single family home. That's permitted by right. You don't need to ask for permission. So it'd be a roommate situation, 4 people that are unrelated. Anything that exceeds that requires a conditional use permit. So they would be exceeding what's allowed by right by 2 people, but they could not exceed the 6 people. 6 is the maximum.
Can I ask a math question?
Yeah.
If the people in the basement are married, then you still have 4 unrelated?
No, because the owner is the person they would be related
Okay, okay,
to.
okay.
So they would still be unrelated because the owner is not residing.
Excellent. Okay.
I thought, yeah.
Just want to make sure.
It can get complicated.
I have 2 more questions. First is just looking at the floor plans. This is clearly set up as the basement being an apartment. Has this
Correct.
been a rental before?
I can't speak historically to how it's been used, previous owners. I do know that there is a kitchen in the basement, and that is a legally non-conforming kitchen that's been there for who knows how long.
Okay. Well, then the mudroom upstairs has a door, so the mudroom closes off, so it becomes an entry to a separate unit down below. So my second question then is, what is this, based on our previous CUP, what is the parking requirement for this home?
So for this home, the parking requirement is 2 parking stalls. It is a single-family home characteristically because there is no separation between the upstairs and the down. Regardless that there's a mudroom, there's no walled off, there's no separate entrance, it's not separated at all. So given that there are 4 bedrooms, it requires 2 parking stalls.
Even though they're all unrelated.
It's 3 bedrooms.
There's another bedroom downstairs.
No, I meant on the main floor.
So yeah, there's 3 bedrooms on the main floor and then there's an additional bedroom in the basement.
Right. And so that only requires 2.
2. Correct.
And if there were 6 people residing here, does that affect the code parking
No.
requirement?
No.
'Cause it's
Just
surrounded
in the
by
way that
bedrooms.
if a family had 2 cars for the adults living in the home and had, say, 3, 4 teenage drivers, they would still only fit under the requirement of 2 parking spaces. Anything in addition to 4 bedrooms requires an additional parking space per bedroom. So if this were a 5-bedroom home, it would require 3 parking stalls.
Okay, so we've got 4 bedrooms, 6 occupants, so 2 of them are sharing a bedroom because we don't have a 5th bedroom, correct? And the site plan shows gravel for 2 parking stalls and 1 garage. So per the city's perspective, they're providing 3 off-street parking,
Correct.
whether or not that old garage door works.
Correct.
I think 3 of them would be sharing a bedroom because there's 3 bedrooms upstairs and there's 1 bedroom
Yeah,
downstairs.
yeah.
And if you're adding 3 more people, that's 3 people in 1 bedroom.
And it says 1 bedroom plus.
Unless you're going to turn the bonus room into a bedroom.
Well, it did say there's a other sleeping area.
No, I turned it off.
Multiply that for me. Just a moment, Amy.
It's not a phone call. I'm getting the
I
calculator.
might have a question.
Okay.
square footage. So
Yeah.
37 times 26,
And divided by 12.
80.167.
So
Question, what, in terms of C Street and Lincoln Street, I know Lincoln has parking on both sides, although St. Mary's has a bus route, or their bus parking is on the west side of Lincoln. That was designated years back. C Street, that's not a snow route, is it? What, I guess what's the parking and snow removal issues with either one of those two streets, since this is on a corner?
So I'm not entirely sure. I don't believe C Street is a snow route. I think the primary snow route is Hayes. I can speak to, put an extra slide in here just in case this conversation did come up about the loading for St. Mary's. It is over on the Monroe side of the school, the loading area, and most of the parking, there is 4 parking stalls on the Lincoln side.
Okay.
Yeah, so as far as congesting or traffic on the Lincoln side, the loading and drop off for St. Mary's does take place on Monroe.
Okay.
As far as snow removal, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure if Monroe or if Lincoln is one of the primary streets and which side they push to and which sides you can and can't park on.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Isn't St. Mary's School operating under a conditional use permit?
Their
Or
daycare,
variance?
the daycare, I believe, is a conditional use, yes.
Were there any conditions on that? Do you remember?
I was not with the
St.
city
Mary's?
when that happened.
Yes.
You all were, the majority of you were actually on the board at
There.
the time.
Actually, I was on that side of the audience at that point in time, and there were 4 CUPs and 2 variances.
Okay.
One of the CUPs had to do with the parking that we see off Lincoln. And I thank you for the clarification. I had forgotten that the busing was put back onto Monroe for that very reason. Because the applicants that, or not the applicants, but the community members on the Lincoln side were concerned about traffic flow and children
Mhm,
along there. And so
for sure.
I only bring that up because I'm sure that there are people out here that are going to argue that 6 people is 6 vehicles, especially if they're students having to go clear back and forth. So that's why I wanted to clarify
Sure.
what the street conditions were. So thank you.
Of course.
You can talk when we open the public hearing. Yes.
Any more questions for staff before we open up our public?
No.
Thank you, Amy.
Welcome.
Okay, with that, we'll open up the public hearing and we'll do just like the last one. I'll have the applicant come up first, state your name and address, and then we'll open up for, after that, for positive testimony,
Do you want to,
negative, and then I'll give the applicant a chance to come back
do you want to read this letter too?
up. Yes.
Flip that.
Yeah, I'll let you
Okay.
state your thing. We had a letter like the first one that was received too
Yeah.
late to get in. So.
Hi, my name is Allison Hodges. Thanks for having me. Good evening to the board. I don't really have much to add to what Amy said. We bought the house last spring for our daughter who is at U of I. And we just, every time when she was living in the dorm her freshman year last year, we would come up to see her. And if we didn't plan months in advance, we were spending $300 plus for hotel rooms. And then we're up over at Pullman, we're all over the place. We were out in Deary. And it was frustrating for me as, you know, I'm an appraiser. I've been an appraiser for 20 years. I come from Hawaii, where we ran a successful bed and breakfast for 6 years. And then I did a short-term vacation rental for another 5 or some odd years before we moved here about 4.5 years ago. We live in McCall. My daughter, so we ended up, one of the reasons why we bought this house, we love old homes. Both of my husband and I were raised in homes built in the 1920s in Hawaii. And so we love the character of the neighborhood, the old home. And one of the benefits of this house is it has this basement apartment. I have no idea what it was used before, how it was used before we bought it. It was already there when we purchased it. but it was for us, my husband and I, and my, my younger kids to come and visit our daughter when we wanted to come and see her. So we would have a place to stay. So we thought about, so she lives in the upstairs with 2 other roommates. So there's 3 vehicles. There's the 2 off-street parking that you saw on the gravel. And then we do have this old garage that the door is not working right now. My husband's a contractor, so he's planning on fixing it. So eventually we will have 3 places. I'm pretty sure C Street and Lincoln are not snow routes. There's plenty of parking. We wouldn't, basically it would be one party that would be renting the basement too. So the 3 people would be a couple and a kid. Is really, probably it's mostly going to be a couple coming to visit. And after, the recent tragic events, we're going to be very careful if this passes who we rent to, because my daughter lives upstairs and these are our neighbors. And I was worried that having 3 college kids living in this quiet, yes, we have St. Mary's, so it's not very quiet. It's bustling, during the week. It's a little, but it's still a quiet, peaceful, historic neighborhood. And I was nervous about, having these 3 college girls live at, our house. And, but I think they're fairly quiet and they're respectful and they've gotten to know their neighbors. And so for adding really couple with a kid, or that was really what we wanted to do to supplement, because we would be coming up every now and then, but we were thinking, there's so much demand for people wanting to come up to visit their kids at the university. Even alumni, we've had friends call us, say, can we stay in your basement because we're U of I alums and we want to come up and do all the things. So ours would mostly be during the weekends. I don't imagine during the week. The friends that we have come, no one is there all day long. They're out doing their thing. Even they just basically come back to sleep. And if we were going to rent it long term, because we are allowed to have 4 unrelated individuals. We thought about putting a 4th roommate downstairs. That would be 4 cars all year round. Whereas this would be a 4th car every now and then, every weekend or so. There's lots of parking on C Street. Every time I come up to visit my daughter, there's lots of parking. We wouldn't actually let the tenants park on Lincoln because of St. Mary's, even though there's parking on both sides of the street and everything. I just don't want to add to that congestion. What else did I want to say? I think that's kind of it. So I'll go sit down if you want to read that letter, and then I can readdress that letter.
At the end,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Actually, wait, before you leave, is there any questions for her?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Let's,
Is the garage usable?
It's usable from walking into it. It's not usable for a car right now because we can't seem to get it's an old garage, probably built in the 20s that hasn't been touched.
And the back is an alley, correct?
The back is an alley. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Can you park in the alleys?
I don't think so. No. That's where the
Garbage.
trash
pickup is
goes.
there, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the garage access through the alley or?
No.
Okay.
It's accessed through C Street.
Is the garage door problem hard? It seems, if you're husband's
No,
a
it's just
contractor.
one of those things where there's lots of things. This house is built in the 20s. There's lots of things that need to be done. So every time we come up, we're working on electrical, we're working on this, so it's just,
Well, I have a house that's 1920s, and you ought to be thankful you got a garage.
yes. Well, and I think it's probably grandfathered because it's in the setback. So we,
Yeah.
we don't want to touch it too much. Just fix the door. The whole thing has been a little, so the door doesn't. So yeah, we got to jack up the foundation. And we actually added another parking spot in the gravel. It was really funky when we purchased it, and we ended up spreading gravel, and now there's 2 proper parking spots off street.
In addition to the garage.
Yes,
So how many cars can park in the gravel area?
2. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Get the negative comments too, so she can address them all at once.
Yeah. I'll read this letter first, and then, well, actually, this one's against. So I'm going to open it up for anybody who would like to speak in favor of the application to come up and do that. That's what I suspected out of the Fort Russell district. So let me open this up now to people with neutral or negative comments, and I'll start that with this letter.
I thought you wanted to be positive. Ma'am, were you wanted to speak positively?
Oh, my apology. You neutral?
That's what I thought.
Let me go ahead and read this letter, and then you'll be next. In regards to conditional use permit application LUP 2023-0002. I, Michael Irwin, residing at 406 North Howard Street, a single-family residence, urge the Board of Adjustments to reject the application for the aforementioned conditional use permit for the following reasons. I have a long planning horizon, as should the city of Moscow. A good decision now should still be a good decision 50 years from now and beyond. Choices that seem innocuous now need to be framed in the context of long-term consequences. The subject property is part of the Fort Russell Historical District. My charming neighborhood, one of the reasons I choose to buy my house 27 years ago. It is a neighborhood in which I know almost all my neighbors and turnover is slow. We have neighborhood shared cookouts and farewell parties to those unfortunate enough to move elsewhere. Across the street from me, two adjacent houses have small children that play together frequently. It's an environment that doesn't exist anywhere and contributes to the value of my property. It is the kind of place that people want to escape to. Permitting 8 unrelated individuals to live together may be economically desirable for the residents, but I forever changed the character of the neighborhood. Well, it will forever change the character of the neighborhood, making a house more like a dormitory, hotel, commune, or boarding house. That's why zoning laws preclude such occupancy. Single families are different. A single family puts less strain on city resources than 8, which I will state for the record is incorrect. Unrelated people. Does anyone think that living in the vicinity of a dormitory improves the value of their property? I am invested in the ongoing well-being of my community. Related people crowding into a single dwelling are less likely to be so. Approving the conditional use permit sets a precedent forever. If a future CUP is made asking for a variance to allow, say, 9 unrelated people to live in a single-family zoning anywhere in the city and is disallowed, the applicant could loudly cry discrimination and possibly threaten legal action. Approving the present application is an invitation to eternal litigation. The Board of Adjustments has the opportunity to make a wise, forward-thinking choice or a poor, short-sighted one. Please choose what continues to be in the best interest of keeping Moscow the idyllic place to live it is known to be for now and always. Michael Irwin. That said, I would now open the floor for you to come up and state your name and give us your thoughts, please.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Ostravy. I've lived on Lincoln for probably close to 40 years and know about the school and the problems that we have in the wintertime and all year long. And the bus route does come on Lincoln. I think they may have changed it when they folded the preschool in with the regular school. So I don't see it coming on Monroe, the bus, but it's possible. I have one concern. Is there an egress window in that basement? So if there's a bed by that one street on C Street, is there an egress window? So I was just kind of concerned about that. But these people have been wonderful. They came and introduced themselves to us. The daughter's been very gracious. We both enjoy the tenants. I have concerns only about the parking because maybe when she comes, there is plenty of parking on C Street, but I've seen that plugged so in the winter times I can't get through it. And there are many bed and breakfasts or people renting their rooms or whatever in that area. I know of two. And through the years, the basement apartments have been rented down the street from us. So whether they're legal or illegal, I don't know. I don't go check on them. But there is not much parking when you're letting those kids off. And it's kind of dangerous, I think, for the kids to get across the street there. But if there's some allowance more for the parking, I don't object to it. I just don't want to see these kids get hurt because we plugged up all the parking, because that's the only place on Lincoln on the right-hand side or the side closest to the houses that they can park to let off their kids. And the buses park on the other side of the street. My husband does a lot of the plowing because he has a truck with the plow on the front and the plow on the back to help keep the streets clean and keep that parking space for the teachers clear. And he goes clear around the block. I mean, he does way too much. He should be paid by the city. But
I'm only a couple blocks away. He could go a little further.
And there's still a berm of snow. Nobody comes to pick up the snow and he has no place to put it. So I get concerned about that. And it's the little kids. It's not to do with anything else. And when you get 3 more people in that house, I'm sorry, you're going to get a couple of visitors and you're going to have more cars that might, and I've seen the cars parked in front of the house, but I just like to see some of the parking relieved for the kids. That's my only concern. Yes.
Ma'am, you said you know that there's quite a few legal or illegal bed and breakfasts or Airbnbs in the neighborhood. Other than parking, has that been a problem?
No.
Okay.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Who would like to come up and speak about this CUP? Please state your name and address into the record for us.
My name is Sarah Pepper. I live at 810 East B Street, so right around the corner from this property. I agree that parking could be an issue, but not only parking, the traffic, because we do have parents dropping off kids. Most of them don't take the bus, and the bus does come on Lincoln. But just, mornings and afternoon pickup and drop off times are quite busy. I have to go out. Usually I go out on the Monroe Street side to get to D, to get downtown. But it's often very busy there and hard to yeah. So, and there on C Street, there is a daycare as well. So there's often parents, coming at the end of the day to pick up kids there. Someone mentioned visitors to this property, so that would be additional pressure on the on-street parking and so on. In addition, with the Slonaker Drive, the new development out there, I anticipate D Street's going to get a lot busier. People coming through town that way. So just the overall increase in traffic, not just parking, which is an issue, but the overall traffic flow, I think is already getting busier in that area, and people tearing up and down B Street. And I think you mentioned that there are other residential areas in the city that are zoned for this type of thing. So rather than bring it into an alternatively zoned, an R2 neighborhood, it seems to me this type of thing would be more appropriate in an area that's already zoned for that type of residential situation, the 6 unrelated individuals. And also being a parent of a student, who will be graduating at some point in time, do you plan to continue owning the property and looking out for it the same way, or would you sell? It sounds like if you sold it, the conditional use permit wouldn't stay with the house though. So maybe that's not an issue, but so those are some concerns. So I guess that is a question though, if these current residents are no longer resident in that house, but the owner is the same, would there be a new set of 6 unrelated residents ongoing into the future? We don't know that they'll all be good neighbors. And so those are my comments. Once this student graduates, there could be another new set of 6. So, thank you.
Sarah, I have a question for you because you made a comment that jogged my memory about a previous CUP for the daycare. If I remember correctly, it's on the corner of C that's just off. Is that
There's a
correct? Is that
daycare on
one?
C
Or is it in
and
one?
Hayes. So this daycare, I think, is St. Mary's, part of St. Mary's.
No, I thought,
But there is a daycare on C and, it's like on the alley, C in the alley.
okay, so it's
between
not,
Hayes
it's
and-
not on the corner of C and Lincoln, it's in one. Is that right?
It's, it's on the corner of C and there's an alley that goes, so it's not quite on Hayes either. It's between Hayes and Lincoln.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the other side of the alley.
Okay.
Yeah, the other side of the, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think Amy was going to make a comment about the difference between a conditional use permit and a variance.
No, I was just going to mention, that the owner would be able to decide which 6 unrelated individuals would live in the home. That the CU would not be tied to the people living there, and the residents could change.
So a conditional use permit is not tied to the applicant?
No, it is the location.
Oh, okay.
If the use ceases, I believe it's for, I want to say 12 months, maybe 24 months. If the use ceases for that period of time, then the CU would no longer be valid.
Okay.
24 consecutive months.
Someone else care to come up and speak? Please. Thank you.
My name's Renee Bafus, and I live at 402 North Hayes. And I am opposed to the conditional use permit that would allow 402 North Lincoln to host short-term rentals. If projected occupancy is 35%, this equates to 128 days per year where people who are strangers to the neighborhood will visit, and this is concerning for me as a resident. The short-term rental would be directly located across the street from the elementary school, and strangers not familiar with the area and the school zone may inadvertently drive faster, which is a safety issue. There is also significant traffic congestion on Lincoln Street Monday through Friday in the morning and after school when parents are dropping off and picking up children. In addition, there are at least 12 very young children who live on C Street where parking is proposed. This will be a concern for parents with strangers and their cars that come and go. C Street has 4 to 8 cars from neighboring Hayes and C Street residents that park on a regular basis. And this is the proposed parking area for the short-term rental. Compliance criteria 2 states that this is in fact a residential neighborhood. There have been several residents, myself included, who have purchased properties and spent a great deal of money restoring their homes based on the residential zoning that is in place. The criteria response states that there are other short-term rentals and tenants in the area, but I am not familiar with any except those are that are within a block or two of downtown. Questions I have: what are the city's laws on the location of short-term rentals? Are they supposed to be restricted to certain areas? The response to compliance criteria 3 reads that the applicant's adult daughter lives at the property and will ensure guest compliance with nuisances that may be generated. My question is, does the daughter expect to be at home year-round, even during the summer when a rental might occur? And what will happen after the daughter graduates in a few years and is not there to manage the short-term rental? This is not directly related to that, but I walk on a regular basis, and the sidewalk on Lincoln Street has never been shoveled this past winter one time. And I tried to evaluate the Risen Home Builders and the Haiku Cannery B&B, but the website, I couldn't reach it. It said it's taking too long on multiple tries, and the bed and breakfast has been closed. So I'm just mentioning that because these things were part of the applicant's past and present businesses, but I was not able to evaluate them. But they are supporting documents for this application. Regarding compliance criteria Form 5, they state that allowing the short-term rental will be equivalent to adding a 4th long-term tenant and will not impact the area. But for the concerns I have described with the school and young children in the neighborhood, I disagree with this statement. It will bring strangers to the area 128 days per year, and this poses a safety concern. So for those reasons, I would encourage you to vote no on the proposed conditional use permit. It is reasonable for the owners to obtain additional income that is within the current zoning rules by renting to a long-term tenant. And that would be favorable, in my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else cares to come up and
Hi, I'm Timothy Dalton, and I live on 809 East B Street, again, just around the corner from this property. And I don't really have any concerns about having, students and things in the neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood. It is a small house, and 6 people might be kind of a crowd there. Again, I'm not really aware of the parking problems over there, but my real concern is that if you approve this conditional use, that it will continue, that it will extend, it'll be attached to the property more or less permanently. So that what I see is that it's kind of taking the property out of the single family home market. I know personally lots of families that would love to have a home in this neighborhood. Some of them have had to leave town because they couldn't find something they could afford. And when you increase the use, sort of really increasing the value of the property to investors by allowing 6 people to live in there instead of maybe a family. Obviously, you can get a lot more income from 6 individuals than you could even from a family of 6. So it increases the value of the property, which is good for the owners and good for the realtors, but is not so good for families that might want to live in a neighborhood like this. So that's my real concern, is that by approving this increase in use, even though you're not changing the zoning, you're basically changing the possibilities of the property. And the people who live there now, I'm sure they're fine neighbors. Their neighbors say they're fine neighbors. I haven't met them yet, but I'm sure I will. And welcome to the neighborhood and all. But I really am concerned that you're changing the use of that property in the long term, and that it will, in fact, not only discourage a family from being able to live there from now on, really, but it also will, in fact, be detrimental to the neighborhood, or could be if there are short-term rentals there after the students currently there leave, or if there are rented again to 6 students, a bunch of people that we don't really know. there is what's I presume is a short-term rental, since it hasn't been approved as a B&B already, like across the street from me. And what happens with a short-term rental where the owners don't live there is that it's essentially like an empty house most of the week. There's nobody there. There's nobody keeping an eye on things, and they keep the place up nice. And the weekend residents have all been pretty quiet, but it's not like having neighbors. It's like having an empty house there with a big gathering every weekend. So, and same thing could happen to this property if and when the current owners leave. So if you approve this, I would recommend that you in fact do put some kind of a condition on it, that it reverts to a proper single family, a 4-person residency or a family residency upon vacation. I don't know if you want to do that or if you can do that, but otherwise I would plead that you don't allow this conditional use, and you consider the same thing for any more of these that come before you, because as soon as you approve one of these, it sort of encourages investors to look at what are single family properties and think, oh, I could probably get a conditional use too and change this up, which kind of acts to, I think I turned this off, but it kind of acts to increase property values all throughout the city, really, when you have investors or investment companies coming in and looking at property and how much is this worth to me, and if I can rent it to 6 people, then it's worth a lot more than if I can only rent it or sell it to a family. So I urge you to think about that when you look at this kind of situations, that we already have a sort of a shortage of single family homes, and they're all so priced that families can't afford to live here. Okay, that's my input. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does this thing work?
Yep, it's
It
working.
does. I'm Roberta Radovich, 809 East B Street. I would say technically a block and a half down from the St. Mary's School, and around the corner also a block and a half away from this house. In our neighborhood, it is not uncommon for us to see overflow from the St. Mary's School building and all of its activities already. We'll see somebody who will come and park a car. We're a block and a half away, but they'll park a car and it will be there 4 to 6 hours during the day. And then they'll show up again as school is getting out. So this is not uncommon. The area already is seeing overflow parking. It's not being constrained by the parking that's available near the school. Now, the idea that we have 3 girls with 3 cars and possibly 3 other residents makes it sound like you might have 4 or 5 cars. But 3 girls each have a boyfriend. And the residents who are using the downstairs have people they're visiting in town who would love to see the digs. So you're going to see more cars. I do rentals myself. Many of my residents have 2 cars for an individual. The car that they drive as a daily driver, the truck that they take up into the woods, or the camper that the husband and wife takes. I don't see any reason why there can't be more than 1 car per person in this situation if it continues long-term particularly. 3 girls are less likely to have that extra truck. But 3 guys, you can bet on it. There'll be an extra truck or 2. I drive down Lincoln Street, and I try not to during the time when school gets out. My goodness, it's frightening. there are so many things happening. I creep down at about 5 miles an hour, hoping there's not going to be somebody dashing out across, because it is truly already, it's a fearful situation. You just can't tell what's going to appear until it's already there, because the street is so narrow and the cars are tall. It really bothers me that a conditional use permit could go from people who might take care of it well to people who might not. That is asking for trouble, and I don't want to see this is the historic district. We have just a few areas of our town that are historic districts. This isn't just like a crackerbuck housing, and I don't like to see it altered and turned into something that can be used like a dormitory or those kind of. And well, Tim said that the house diagonal to us that has been being rented out has not had parties. They did have a rave there. The police were involved, and there was arrests made. So we don't necessarily want to see a bunch of potential for that kind of thing happening in our neighborhoods. So I guess I will also own a house on Almond Street near the grain elevators. And recently, within the last few years, there was a change made down there where someone asked for a permit to change the zoning to have a business by Barley Flats. And here in front of everybody, they said, oh, well, it's going to just be, we'd like to save this grand old building with the, and, reuse that and have a little business in there. But they didn't promise it. They just wanted to do that, right? Within 2 years, that property has been sold. The building has been torn down. There's no guarantee that the next guy is going to do what the guy who stands before you here says, unless it's in writing. And so I'm very much opposed to things that carry on and can carry on to other people that clearly, how long does somebody stay here for college? We're looking at a situation where we have a residential neighborhood that I have lived in since 1972. And I really love it. I walk home from when I walk down to downtown, and I just say to Tim, I say, how can this be that we are in this little pool of peace and beauty here? I am very eager to preserve that in a world that is full of trauma. And this whole thing with just changing the very nature of our neighborhoods, and especially changing them long term, I would ask you to disallow that in this situation. That's all I have to say. Are there any questions for me?
Nope.
No.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Spencer Martin. I live at 902 East B Street, which is on the corner of B and Lincoln. You cannot help but empathize with the love of a parent for their child and the safety of their child. And you can't help but empathize for wanting to come visit your child. This has nothing to do with the occupant that is in that home right now. It has to do with that home, because reality is the tenants will move, the owners will sell. And while there is no guarantee that if it's a single family home, you're going to get a perfect neighbor, when you times that by 6, it changes the entire aspect of that area. There is a reason why you have that 4-person limit here and why you have multi-use houses and abodes elsewhere. The problems that you're facing, they were facing them in 1920. They were facing them in 1950. Welcome to Moscow. So you change it now. How does that add up? Lincoln Street, the parking, the traffic is a nightmare. Just as you worry about the safety of your children, so do we. You have a 3-year-old and a 9.5-year-old that are walking to school to St. Mary's every day. You add 3 more cars, that's 3 more chances for children to get hurt. How does that add up when there are other places in town where you can have 6 people living? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I think for almost everybody, I see 2 people who haven't spoke yet. One's the press and one's got a mask. So, well, with that, if the applicant would like to come back up, and you don't required to, but if there are some of the things that were stated that you think you can address, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, everyone, for what you have to say. I hear you. There are a couple of things. There is an egress window. There's actually downstairs in the basement. There's actually no true bedroom. It's kind of a big room. The kitchenette and dining area are a little bit separate, but everything else is kind of a big room. Yeah, if you want to pull that up, Amy. So that sleeping area, there's no wall that separates that sleeping area from the sitting area. So it's kind of like just a big studio. The utility furnace room would be locked off because that's where it's basically a true basement. That's where our sump pump is and everything. So in terms of the number of people, and I know everyone's thinking 6 totally unrelated individuals. Like I said, this would be one party we would be renting to, no more. And really, if you wanted to bring it back down to only 5 unrelated individuals and limit it to a couple, that would be okay. I was just thinking 3 because that's what the CUP says, up to 6. Because if someone has a young child that they want to bring with them, and really, this is mostly to support the university family. Because most people, so when we bought this place, I initially put the basement on Airbnb before reading the rules of what we're allowed to do. And we were inundated with people wanting to stay. And I was shocked because, well, for me, as I knew last year trying to come up here and stay, there's nowhere to stay if you're like, oh, last minute, let's go visit our daughter. No, you're spending, $300 for a 2-star motel. And we ran a historic bed and breakfast. And I know someone said that they tried to find the Haiku Cannery, and of course it's been closed for years now. I'm not sure what happened with the Risen Home Builders. My husband is a small contractor. He doesn't get a lot of work via and he's very old school. He doesn't like the internet. He hates his phone. He wishes he could run it over. We do things by the book, which is why we're here. I know there's a lot of probably illegal bed and breakfasts around or short term, and we don't want to go that route. We wanted to come here in front of the community and say, we're doing this by the book. We want to do it. We want to hear what you have to say. And I hear about the safety of the children. And like I said, we wouldn't allow parking on Lincoln. It is congested during the day with the kids. And like I said, every time I've come up to visit, C Street is really pretty quiet and calm, and there's tons of parking. What else did I want to touch on? Oh, in terms of how, so my daughter will be graduating she's a sophomore, but she loves it up here. And whether or not she stays here or not, she may end up staying here. She is staying through the summers. She's got a research job that she's a chemical engineer major. And she's got a research project that she's getting paid for this summer, so she's staying here throughout the summer. The other roommates, I'm not sure what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. So she is the one who will be managing this short-term rental for us. And she is very responsible. We are going to have rules about when you can, quiet time and check out. I mean, we've done this a lot. And she used to clean for us in Hawaii, and she was the best cleaner by far. And so I really trust her, and she's excited to do it so she can make some money. And because she has no time, she has no life. She is at school all the time. And so she didn't have time to go get a job. So this is providing an opportunity for her and her roommates to clean and make some money. Also, I have a son who's a sophomore in high school, and he's most likely going to be coming to U of I as well. So our plan isn't to just have our daughter come in and out, sell the property. We're looking at a long-term investment for our kids, and then I have a 10-year-old also. So whether or not, my son comes here to stay, but I do want to touch on the permit going with the property, not with the applicant. Is that correct? So I would be happy for there to be a condition that once we sell, the permit is null and void. I think that's a great idea. That's how it was in Hawaii. The permit went with the applicant, not with the property. And I don't know if you have to go through all kinds of city things for that, but I think that would probably assuage a lot of fears of people of like, if we were to sell down the line and then this permit goes with the property and then some investor buys it and puts 6 total, 6 people, and then it's like a dormitory. And then you have 6 cars and they're friends. And so I definitely don't like that either. One gentleman said that it does increase the property value, whereas the last guy who came up with the other permit, he was upset that it was going to decrease the value. So, I mean, I think most people want their property values to increase. And I've noticed as being an appraiser, when you do have a short-term rental in your house, especially when there's that separate entrance. Amy, can you bring up my the first floor? Back one. There. The mudroom it's a partially enclosed, it's an enclosed mudroom with like a storm door. And so the girls have a secure door to go into the kitchen. And then the basement has its own secure door to go down. I don't know why I brought that up. But anyways, if we wanted to put 3 completely unrelated individuals downstairs, you would want 3 bedrooms. We don't even have 1 bed. It's a studio. So it's really, we just want it for a family to come up, and we want to support the people who live all over Idaho or Washington to be able to come and visit their kids without spending a fortune if they want to come last minute. And selfishly, we want it for ourselves as well. In terms of like safety, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to address that right now for this, what's been going on with this community. I feel like if we're supporting the school with bringing parents to come and visit their kids, it's fairly safe. I mean, yes, and I'm going to be vetting these people, but that's me. And like, if I were to sell and the permit was going to go with somebody else, I don't, that's not, you don't know. My word is important, and I will live by my word. So one thing I wanted to say too is someone talked about changing the neighborhood, and they wanted the one person to stay downstairs, or the 4-person unrelated people. That would mean one person living downstairs. That would be 4 people, so 4 cars. That would be long term. I think in a way that's more use than having, we were guessing about 35% rental occupancy rate. If you combine a full 100% occupancy rate with a 1 person downstairs versus a 35% occupancy rate with, still really one car, a family. I think they almost balance each other out. Bedrooms, strangers, I think that was it. Yeah, and like I said, we wouldn't allow parking on Lincoln. We wrote a little sign where the parking would be off of street C, right by the little gate. And really, we're only anticipating one car. And the few people we have come, like I said before, to stay, they're never there. Like Haley, my daughter, she's like, Mom, I never see them. Are they here? You know, because they're out doing stuff, whatever the university is up to, or whatever the community is up to. They're there to sleep. They don't even eat at the place. They're out and going, you know. So I feel like the impact is going to be very minimal overall. Any questions?
Marshall?
Oh, I was just wondering on your gravel parking area, do you know how big that is or how big you can expand it if you needed to?
Are you looking at the aerial thing? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you can't see it.
You want the site plan, I think is what you want to look at. 'Cause it's got the gravel parking lot there. There you go. Whoop.
Oh,
Right there.
So in the measurements that I took when looking at this to make sure that it fit two cars adequately with the two, if they were to extend it further to the west, they would accommodate an additional, it would be removing of the fence that's already there and existing. And I believe there's a tree that would also be an issue.
yeah, good luck with the tree. I've already talked to the tree guys. They don't want to remove any of those trees, although we've had to remove one because it was dying. But those trees are in the right of way for the city of Moscow. And I already had the city tree guy come out, and that tree is dying. You guys had a tree that died too, right? Yeah. So there's something going on with these evergreens in here. That one that's by the gravel parking lot is not dying, but the big one right there is starting to show signs. Yeah, that one's starting to show signs of death. I don't know if we could, like that tree is right in the way.
You could always pull forward and extend those drive. You can park in tandem for residential uses.
Oh,
50% of the parking can be provided in tandem configuration. So you could always
go forward. Yep, that's doable. That could be doable. Any other questions? Any other questions?
I just have a clarification. You said your daughter was a sophomore, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming that unless she goes on to grad school or something, she would graduate in 2025.
Yes.
So if we were to put a time limit on this to revisit it in 2 years, at that point, you'd know if your son decided to come up here or someplace else, or if she was going to stay, or what you would be doing. And really, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, what we might discuss, but would that be something that you would be acceptable to entertain as an option?
Sure.
If this
I mean,
were to pass, that you'd have to come back and revisit it in 2 years and see what your
yeah, in
long-term
Hawaii,
future.
when we did this and got these permits for the bed and breakfast and the short-term rentals, they did it something like your first year, the first time you got your permit, it lasted a year. And then after that year, when you went back and reapplied or however you did, it was a lot easier process the second time around. Then it went for like 5 years. But the first year was like this this period to find out if more people are going to come and complain, how it works, like how with that Itani guy, you know, to see what kind of impact it's going to have in the neighborhood. So as much as we left Hawaii because of the politics and all of that, I don't like, there are certain things that, you know, I understand what they're doing. part of the issue is though, is there are so many illegal rentals out there that the people who do try to go by the books, we're the ones who often have all these restrictions and burdens placed on us to do it legally, whereas everyone else just doesn't really, they don't even know or don't care. But that's the way of the world. But yes, I would be happy to revisit and come back in 2 years to see, what our plan is with the property. I mean, I really think that you guys should look at the permit going with the person, the applicant, and not with the property, because that would solve a lot of problems, I think, a lot of concerns. Even though, like, yes, I could say I'm going to do one thing and do another, I wouldn't. That's the way I am. And my husband, we only have a studio downstairs, and it's meant for a family. And not 3 unrelated individuals downstairs. So.
Any other questions for applicant? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, with that, we've actually covered everybody in the auditorium here. So we'll close the public hearing and open it up for the board to deliberate. I have a question for staff, and it's only because I'm trying to remember from 2 decades ago, but when we talk about the Fort Russell district, I seem to remember that everybody thought it went to the corner of D and Hayes, but doesn't it actually stop at Monroe between St. Mary's and the daycare, or what was the convent?
So I had it
I mean,
pulled up earlier on my
technically,
phone.
I mean, the whole thing is a block, and it makes sense that that's how it would be perceived. But from an actual property standpoint, I don't think it's in.
So I think the boundary is right there at C Street. Let me pull up, I think I can get it on the internet. I'll just see where the boundary actually is. Sorry, my name is as quick as I can. Of course, it's going to be under maps rather than historic preservation.
No, it is under the Fort Russell Historic District. Related documents.
Doesn't matter.
No, I only bring that up as a matter of facts of finding, because honestly, I could argue it either way. The houses, the age of the house, the type of houses, this is all a neighborhood. So I'm not meaning it for one way or the other. I just didn't, for the record.
Once you got it, it's interesting to see.
The location of the property is here, so it is not technically in the Fort Russell district.
Interesting. It's the
See
way
where my
it's designed
mouse is
there.
right there.
It was gerrymandered.
Yeah. Oh, did they expand? This is an outdated map? Okay. Yeah, so the subject property would be just outside. I don't know if there's a date on here. Exploring, so it has not yet. Okay.
I honestly thought the comment was in there. Man, I feel slighted now. 20 years ago, they rammed that down my throat. But that's neither here nor there.
You're losing your memory, bro.
Yeah, in my mind, it's still the neighborhood. I just, from a technical fact of finding, it's
Not
still an old home in
technically,
an old neighborhood, and it has the issues that we're dealing with. Thank you. Marshall,
Comments?
start us off. Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
I always make it a habit to, whenever there's a conditional use permit or variances, to drive by and see in reality what's out there. So the past couple of days, I drove down C Street and B Street and Lincoln Street, and the neighbors are absolutely correct. Lincoln Street is filled with cars. I went about 2:00 in the afternoon. Both sides of the streets were completely packed with cars. But the interesting thing, there were no cars at all on C Street adjacent to this property. Both days at 2:00, there were no cars on C Street. I just thought I'd bring that up. And there was a question about an egress window in the basement. That window does meet egress standards. So that's one of the things I looked at too. So if the graveled parking area could be expanded to 3 cars, that would make me feel more comfortable.
You don't want 4?
So I take all I can get.
I'm sorry.
But I don't want to see any trees cut down or anything like that. And that historic garage probably ought to stay. So, yeah, it's a beautiful neighborhood. Love the trees. Nice old house. But I think if the parking could be alleviated a little bit, I would go for that. And Amy, as far as tying the conditional use permit to the applicant and not the property, that's why I asked that
You can definitely do that.
we can do
Mhm.
that legally.
Yes.
Okay. So I wouldn't have a problem with that either. The 2-year time period to come back and revisit it, I think I'm agreeable to that. So.
Jerry?
So I want to start by thanking you for raising a family of vandals. Thank you. The existing studio, oh, this is really loud. The existing studio apartment is kind of where I'm hung up. I mean, you could put an extra person in there, and as I think it was you stated, you've got 3 girls with 3 boyfriends, and now you've got somebody else. You have a total of 8 cars that you're trying to deal with. Based on, I think you're overestimating your 35%, 33%, because just in a quick, there's 52 weekends in a year. There's 2 days in a weekend. That's 104 days, and you don't have every weekend that you're going to book. So,
Over engineers.
So I don't think that's such a problem either. If we could make it so that it stays with you, and when you sell, it goes away, that makes me exceedingly happy. And like Marshall, if we can, as I said before, we never have enough parking in Moscow. I don't know why. Even when I was in planning and zoning and I argued for more parking, I was always shot down because parking doesn't matter, but it does. It's a reality. So if we could increase the parking, yeah, I'm actually feel pretty confident with this one. Also, the other problem and the other thing that I want to address is everybody's talking about the children at the school. Well, most of this time you're going to be renting this is the weekend. And while there is a gymnasium there and they do have some events at the school on the weekend, parents are going to be there supervising their children more so than they would be during the week during classes. And it's the weekend when most of the kids should be home watching television, or do they watch? They don't watch TV anymore. They play games. So, but anyway, that's what I got.
We got a parking issue that we're talking about, but from what I heard, we got equally important, in fact, even more so, is traffic. So solving a parking problem by adding more parking spaces, in my mind, just aggravates the traffic problem because they go hand in hand. The city's equation here just doesn't seem to fit for this project. Since the dwelling only contains 4 bedrooms, only 2 parking spaces are required. Yes, the applicant has 3, but as I'm listening to all of the comments by the community, I have to agree that most likely there's going to be a lot more cars with 6 people in there than just 3 cars. And that's what I'm hearing is a major concern. I understand that the owner would prefer to see families instead of 3 girls. I don't know if that's always going to be the case. My granddaughter lives in a room in a dorm that's got 2 bunk rooms in it, 2 bunk beds. So you can cram a lot of girls in a room, I can tell you that. So, and I agree, they probably come with a car. So I just really have a hard time trying to accept the occupancy, expand the occupancy of this small house in a area that seems to be quite congested.
Well, I've got some of the similar concerns right now. It appears from what the schematic shows that there's parking for 2 cars, and right now they've got 3 vehicles or 3 tenants there, which means there's 3 cars already here when there's only really parking for 2 off-site on the land. But they have the C Street is there, and C Street's the public street to park on. So it's not the end of the world in that respect, because those people are permanent tenants. It's the people that were going to be coming intermittently, and we have no idea how often that might be, but they are going to be forced to be parking on the street or someplace other than on the ground at this point in time. And so that seems to be, again, the parking seems to be an issue, and it doesn't matter where you are in Moscow, parking is an issue everywhere. But I go of having a term put onto the SUP, and I would it could either be the ownership, like Jerry was mentioning, or it could be just a time frame, and come back and revisit it and have the opportunity to see how that 35% is working, see how with having 3 cars there, with only parking for 2, adding another car doesn't really solve any problem issues. And maybe in the meantime, the 1-car garage will be repaired, or another parking spot could be added someplace else on the land. And, so, I mean, it could be not forced on them to do it, saying that it has to be done, but they might be able to do it on their own and find a place to put vehicles that 2 years down the road, everybody's really comfortable with the situation. So those are my thoughts. That parking is an issue, but I think that a time limit would be advisable, just for seeing how those 6 people, or the maximum of 6 people would actually pan out. On weekends, it's
We kind of have to plan on worst case, don't we?
Well, I always get in trouble saying this, but parking is always a perceived issue. And in my opinion, it's not. You make it work. I've got, or have had, they're growing up and moving out, but I had 4 kids. So we have 6 people in our house that had the same parking configuration as the previous CUP. And you tend to make it work. Something unique about this in terms of parking is that it has a 40-foot backyard. You can't park in the alley, but you can actually park off the alley, and the average house has a 20-foot backyard. And so you could theoretically park off the alley in the backyard area. So there are lots of ways to deal with the parking. The applicant already wants to stay away from Lincoln, so they've clearly, from a safety and observation standpoint, are aware of that. I, like Roberta, walk from downtown home, and I'm northeast off this map, and I like to walk kind of diagonally through that whole historic district because, like C Street, it's not busy, but I like to stay away from Hayes and D. And so parking can be an issue, but I think this as a corner lot and double parking sides of the street, even though it's next to a school, I see parking as less of an issue for this one, this CUP, than the previous CUP. In addition, that tree, I think if we decide that we want to have them provide parking off street, I wouldn't force them to put it there under the canopy of that tree that's already got issues when it could be behind.
Yeah, how about here?
Yeah, that's why I marked those in there. I will say this with the tree disease issue, way back, St. Mary's had the same thing along Lincoln. They had to have one removed for the disease issue. So I don't know what the city arborist is doing or can do in that area, but it's an issue, and big trees when they fall can be a problem. So, so again, if we as a group decide that we want to add parking, I wouldn't necessarily dictate where it goes. I think we'd leave that up to the applicant. The parent of college students, I came up here in '84, loved the community and the neighborhoods, and I stayed. Her daughter may very well mimic that. A lot of people in Moscow move up here and stay. Her son may or may not do the same thing. She might be faced in 2 or 4 years with the same problem that I have. My kids want to know when I'm moving out so that they can have our house. So there's already clearly a separate studio at some point. This house is just configured that way. So I think it's doable. I think my biggest concern, and this was new to me tonight, I thought that CUPs ended with the owner, not the property. So if we can address that, I don't have an issue. Because, I shouldn't say this, as a designer, I could see how someone would come onto this lot and densify it in horrible ways to this community. And I don't want to see that. I don't think this applicant wants to do that. And everyone has in very gentle words stated that. And so I think we're all on the same page there. Motion? Hear a motion?
Yeah, I'll give it a
Marshall
try.
do it.
I'll give it a try.
He's been working on it here for about 20 minutes.
One thing we try to do as a board is really important, that we listen to the people in the neighborhood. And we try to give suggestions to fix problems or totally deny it or approve it with conditions. I mean, we've got different choices, but it's always important to me to listen to people that live in the neighborhood, especially somebody living next door. And we didn't get any buddy representing St. Mary's School, which I was a little bit surprised at, but it could have affected them, and nobody chose to show up, which is fine, but everybody else did. So I'm always trying to solve the problems or give options to people. So I'd make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the condition to expand the off-street parking area to 3 vehicles and leave it up to the applicant to figure out how they would like to do that in their yard. And that the other condition is the conditional use permit would expire with the ownership of the property. And that there is a time that we would revisit or reapply for the conditional use permit after a period of 2 years.
Did you said three on site, but there already is 3. The garage and the 2 places next to it.
In addition to the garage?
Yeah.
So 3 in addition to the garage?
Yes.
Okay. So for a total of 4.
For a total of 4.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. We'll start at this end of the table this time.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye. So it is approved 4-1. Do you want to discuss it further, or do you want to?
No.
Okay. Motion for,
A motion to ask staff to prepare us the findings and the
findings of fact.
finding of facts and relevant criteria.
I have a motion.
Second?
I have a second. Let's go down the row again.
Aye.
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 Aye. So that's unanimous. So we are done with our second one.
Boy, this parking comes up all the time.
Point of procedure.
Do we,
Okay,
do we feel okay with the current zoning, the way it's written for parking? Should we? Is it- I know, well, I know it's not up to us, but do we have an input? I mean, we're the ones that
Oh,
keep the
if
deal with
they
it all.
change it, And then you can.
I
come
wouldn't want to. I don't want to confuse it.
Time for a
Well,
bathroom
it seems like we get a lot of.
Yes, we
access
have,
the
we have to
public
do,
and-
we have to do our election of officers, but if, let's take a 5-minute recess to get a drink of water or use the bathroom, and then the audience can clear or they can stay, and then we'll proceed with our last items.
So when I see all that housing being built.
All right,
side of
welcome
Mountain
back.
Drive On Third Street, it- to me, it's
We have
so darn
one last
obvious.
item to address,
this a
and that
highlight?
is election of
It'll work for
officers
me.
now for 2023. And I guess let's open that up for discussion.
Well, what are we doing, Joe?
We're voting for.
We're voting for a president and a chairman and a vice chair.
Yeah.
I would nominate Joe to do it again for a couple of reasons. One, he's really good at it. And two, he likes to do it. So I would nominate Joe as
It is kind of fun being the moderator and not someone actually has to come up with motions anymore. I will say though, I'm not working in Spokane anymore, so that terminated.
You been fired? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh.
no, not saying that. But I don't have that commute anymore. So getting to the meetings, I know over the past 2 years was, well, the first half of that we were doing Zoom anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered where I was
Yeah.
working.
how horrible.
But I can make meetings now, even the 5:30 ones. So
So
I seconded.
And I'd like to continue to have Marshall as the vice chairman so that when Joe isn't here.
we got to vote.
How about I move by acclamation that Joe be chair and Marshall be vice chair?
Well, I'll be happy to do it when I can come because I'm busy with projects out of town. And when spring comes, we're going to be down on the farm as much as we can. So.
did you not understand retirement?
No, I don't. I flunked.
That's how you define the term.
Okay, so I guess, we kind of have a motion to do the first one and a motion to do both
Let's
simultaneously.
do the first one first.
Let's do the okay.
Okay.
Second to Marshall.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it was unanimous. So I guess I retain this spot. So second motion,
Marshall as vice chair.
and do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That one also was unanimous. So
Hey, Amy, are we short a member or is he just not showing up?
Tim is not here. We are short one.
Or short one still?
that actually, I know our last thing is new upcoming stuff. I was going to ask that question. Does
Annette?
the city or the council, anybody have a replacement in mind yet?
I don't think it's my application, but I do know that the mayor mentions it at pretty much every meeting, vacancies that are.
You might slip a note to him, tell him no attorneys. That was the reason I came back on the board because there were 3 or 4 attorneys here. And it was a legal battle. You know, they were turning down everything for technicalities. So
Actually, Mark Monson might have been
was
the
a-
exception.
He was really.
Mark was
good.
really
Mark
good.
was the exception.
Yeah.
But
Jerry Ford, or was it?
that attorney,
Yeah.
attorney professors, let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Pretty detailed.
Couched in theory.
Yeah.
Any other applications forthcoming?
I don't have anything at the moment. There are some pending conversations that
Did we already schedule the signing of this?
Yeah, this
Jennifer,
one,
did you?
Say the 15th.
we did that a while back.
We did?
Yeah.
So a while back.
Well,
then.
I will not be here. on
I
the
don't know if
15th.
I'm here. Did I say I was going to be here, Jennifer?
Let me look.
Yeah, a couple months ago.
I know,
Yeah.
we did those
A lot
almost
the rest of the month.
simultaneously.
I got 3.5 confirmations. So Joe said he could be here. Tim said he could be here, but he would have to, or you, Tim, would have to leave at 5:50. And Jerry said he would be here, and then
That's
Steve
correct.
said that he might be able to be here.
So, because it's the day after Thanksgiving, or not Thanksgiving, Valentine's.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Singles
I
appreciation.
don't, I don't see any problem.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, you were a maybe because you weren't sure, and I can change you to a good.
And I want to say that's next Wednesday, correct?
The only person that, or Marshall, I didn't get a response from you, but you're saying no.
I won't be here.
And then the other Tim is not gonna be here, so we would have 4 people.
Did you give me a
I got you this
Yeah.
until 5:50 and then they're this.
Yeah, yeah. We should be out of here by 5:50, I think.
Oh, yeah. It'll take us more than 10 minutes to get through all the notes because this meeting went a long time. But
So this
I
one's
can't
gonna get
imagine
5
being
or
there past
5:30?
5:30.
5:30. And it's gonna be here.
Oh, it's at 5:30 and it's here.
I believe so, yeah.
We will be done in 20 minutes.
Okay.
We'll need
So,
to be done in 20
Marshall said he wants to hurry up and get back to see the rest of Biden here, so.
You can always watch it afterwards. It'll be on YouTube for days and days and days and days and days.
All the comments.
Good to know.
Did we adjourn?
Oh, yeah, do we have to move to adjourn?
Oh,
I move we adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn. Have a second.
I'll second.
All right, motion second. All in favor?
Loose there,
Aye.
okay.
Aye.
Aye. All in favor?